And who here has used it enough to be like, I know what it is, but I don't know what I'm doing? I still feel that way, yeah. So, what is Linux? Okay, Linux is not an operating system. Linux is a kernel. But operating systems that are derived from Linux are built, such as Ubuntu, or Fedora, or God forbid Arch or something, or Gentoo. So the kernel itself, though, is Linux. So when you hear like, oh, I broke the Linux kernel, you're not breaking one operating system, you're breaking every operating system that relies on that kernel. So it's different. It was kind of meant to be, well, there's a bunch of confusing things like BSD, which is Mac, which was competing with DOS, which is Windows, but then Mac wasn't free enough or something, so then they made Linux to make it like more free, and now they say it's less free. It all depends on who you ask. It's a very controversial community, and everyone likes to yell at each other on mailing lists. So you're opening up a new world here. But basically, there's a lot of different types of Linux, and you're going to see like just a ton of different operating systems based on this. So when you're like, how's there so many Linuxes? It's because they're running the same kernel or very similar kernels. They're not the same operating system though. Why Linux? It's open source, which means free. You can go on GitHub and look at the exact source code that's being run. You can compile it for yourself and load it up on your computer. You can just do all that. You could change some code, customize it a little bit. It's really difficult to do, but you can. And then you can run it, so it's all open source, it's free. It basically runs on everything. It's run, I think there's ARM, x86, probably weird other like MIPS or some crap, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
MIPS.
Is there? Okay, so there's MIPS, 2 out of 5. And then a lot of them are like optimized, so like people make Linux distributions that are really small to run on something with like a gigabyte of RAM or even less. They make them for beefy computers, they make it for all different types of things. So you can find distros for just about anything, and you can run it on just about anything. So it's kind of nice. It's interesting. You can just like, if you're pen testing, you often find just random devices. And like, oh, I guess this has a Linux shell now. Who would have thought? It's my refrigerator or something. And there's a command line. So the big thing is Windows is not heavily command line focused. You go in, you move your mouse, click on things. Linux is primarily command line focused, especially when you break into our world. In security, it's a lot of servers, which means there's no GUI at all. You're just dropped into a shell, and you're just typing some commands. You don't even have a mouse. And yeah, so it's a lot of command line focus, so it's a lot of like pseudo programming, scripting, and that's kind of what we're going to primarily focus on today. Package managers, this is one of the big key selling points for Linux a lot of people talk about. It's a great way to install software. So in Windows, I want a tool to browse the internet. So I go and I type into Google internet browser, and I go to some website and I download whatever binary off of that website and I run it. But there's no way to tell that that website is not a bad actor. No one's really done any audits of that website. Well, maybe they have. Some websites have, some websites that haven't. But you download code from third parties. When you go to package managers, all the code for most applications that you're going to run into in your day-to-day life are already signed, compiled, installed, and verified by whoever's maintaining that Linux distribution. So for example, Red Hat runs their own repositories. They go build this code for you. They'll cryptographically sign it. And then when you download from the package manager, you know this code has been looked at, hopefully been patched, and is now running on your system. So it's an easy way to install things, but it's also a little bit more secure of a way to install things because you're getting from trusted sources. And the last big thing is it's multi-user / multi-session. This was a big thing back in the day when computers were ridiculously expensive. Instead of having everyone gets a laptop, well, this room over here is our computer, and then you can kind of sign in remotely through dummy terminals. And but you need to have multiple users so that like 5 people can be signed in at once, or whatever. And Windows fundamentally does not handle this. Linux fundamentally does handle this. So it's all about multiple users, which plays into just kind of how processes are managed and everything else. Especially when you're red teaming and you're doing competitions, you'll learn very quickly about other users. That's kind of some of the big. Oops, that's the wrong computer. Big differences. Okay, one of the reasons it's command line oriented, we'll cover that. Okay, so there's different interpreters. These are called shells. You'll commonly hear those. There's a bash, there's sh. sh was the original. Bash came from that. Someone forked csh, zsh. There's a whole bunch of different variants. Some of them have tab completion. Some of them have like colors and different fonts, and they're just as many as you want. The community is pretty big, and there's a lot of different things you can install. In your shell, so when you run the shell program, you will get a prompt. And the prompt you'll see is like this. It'll be like, okay, this is my username on the host name in this directory, and then here's where you start typing commands. These are all edited in a file called your .-rc, which you can customize the colors and what it says and all kinds of things, but that is your prompt. When you see like a prompt looking thing, you know that you are in a shell and you can start entering commands. SecureSHell. This is kind of where things get better because we can remotely monitor these computers. So I can have this headless server up in Amazon Web Services or DigitalOcean, and it's running up there, but I don't have physical access to the computer, so I remote in, the SSH in it, cryptographically signs or encrypts the connection, and Nick's looking at me because I'm saying cryptographically and he doesn't like it. But it initiates a secure connection where you can go and type these commands remotely on other computers, and you can go in, there's different ports you can do, you can use key files. Also note, just a lot of what I'm doing now is like, there's like these flags. I'm not really discussing the flags right now. We put them in the slides, so as you go through this process, you can go back and reference them. But the way flags work, you just kind of append them to the command, and we'll kind of go over a couple examples later. But if you see me like skipping over these like little details, they're here for reference. So when you go back to look at the slides, they're all there for you. But we're not really going to talk about every single flag. Kind of that way. So when you go to SSH, you type in SSH username at whatever box I'm going to go to. Press enter. It says, okay, what's the password for username? You type in your password. Okay, if it's correct, you get a shell. So what that leads to problems is sharing passwords. What if Nick needs to sign on to the same user account that I'm doing on the same computer? Bad practice would be shared usernames. Don't do that. So what they, common practice is keys. So you generate RSA keys, and then Nick would have his own RSA key. I would have my own RSA key. We put it up. Okay, Nick would have an elliptic curve key. I would have an RSA key, and we would put them on the server, and then we'd both be able to get in the same username using each of our own private keys. So we've never shared a password. We have the existing permissions. We are more secure. It's actually even just more secure than passwords in general. And what that allows us is it also allows for remote administration real easy because you don't need to type in a password. You can script things. So if you're using tools like Ansible, which we may cover later if you're not familiar with it, bash scripting, anything really that's using automation is going to want to use a key. And with keys, you don't necessarily need to use passwords, so it just kind of saves time. So whenever you see like SSH, it's common to see public-private keys instead because a lot of people just like using those over passwords, and it's more secure to use over passwords. Man pages. So when you hear man page, you're like, what the heck is that? But you'll hear it all the time. People say, oh, read the man page, loop the man page. Man page stands for manual page. So it is a manual. So if I don't know how SSH works, I type in man SSH, and it'll show me a list of all the different flags I can do, what each of these flags does in the program, how does it change the flow, what can I pass to it, what can I do. So this is going to how you're going to primarily do a lot of learning in the beginning when you're like, oh crap, like was it tar-x or tar-z? Well, there you go, man tar, and you'll get the information. So when you hear these like man, that's what you do. Just type man, whatever, there's probably a man page for it if it's a common tool, and you're going to learn a lot. And you can also man page on Google. So Google has man pages, right? So, well, not Google, but who knows? Okay. So, one of the biggest differences between Linux and Windows, I keep saying that. There's a lot of differences. A primary difference is the file system. Linux went with the everything is a file route. Literally, everything is a file. So processes are represented as files, network sockets are represented as files, streams are represented as files. Everything is just represented as a file. And this is all under the file system. So here you have your root file system. It's like, you cannot go higher than the root. It's like C colon / // on Windows. no, backslash, is the root. But this is the root on Linux. And then within that, you have all these different directories, which then have subdirectories, and it's all a tree navigation system. So when you're learning the command line, it's kind of easy to get lost if you're not familiar, but it's also really easy to learn how to do it. And we're going to be talking about how to navigate the file system a little bit better. But when you see slash, that is the root, and just kind of realize you're in a tree. Everything is a tree. So, and then within that tree, everything is a file. So, wrong line. So we're going to go ahead and talk about kind of how to navigate the thing a little bit. So you have your file system root, there's config, where all your binaries are. These are kind of the things to really focus on. So here you can see the tilde, that is your user's home directory. So if you navigate to tilde, you're going to go to your home directory. Dot is your current directory, in case you need to reference that for some reason. Dot is your parent directory. So if I want to go back up the tree, I'll go dot, it'll take me back. And then dash is the last directory you went to. So if you CD'd accidentally somewhere and you're like, oh crap, I need to go back, dash will take you there. So these are, like I said, this is a very big reference sheet. Feel free, you're going to have the slides, you're going through the demo, and be like, oh, where was that again? And we can go through that. Navigating the file system is a little bit different. So here we have different commands. So I should say my camera. CD, change directory. That's how you get somewhere. So if I want to CD into etc nginx, I will now be in etc nginx. If I want to CD to ////Micah, I will CD 2 directories up, then into Micah, and then into .ssh. So that's changing directories. And then as you're changing directories, you can see where you're at with pwd, which is print working directories. So you're like, where am I? I'm absolutely lost. pwd. If you want to know what's in the directory you're in, ls list shows different files. So I would see into this directory maybe, and then I would list, and I would see all my SSH keys that I'm storing in there. And there's different flags again here, long listing, show hidden files, things such as that. Then we have cat. Cat is concatenate. It prints contents of a file. So if I catted my SSH key, I would just see my SSH key printed out on the terminal. Very simple. These are like your core 101 getting started tools. So when we go to the demo, we'll kind of see a couple examples of how these tools work and kind of move on from there. File permissions, this is another big thing. This is how we monitor who can look at what, who can't look at what within the system. If you use ls-l, it'll show you the permissions of the file and you'll be able to see. So there's 3 groups. So we have owner, group, and everyone else. So in this case, our owner can read, write, and execute the file. He can do whatever he wants to this file. Everyone in his group can read it and execute it. They could look at it, but they can't change it. They don't have write permissions. And then everyone else can maybe just read it, people who are outside of the group. So this can be represented in this notation or in octal notation. The man pages will have that. You can find it on Wikipedia. It's a little interesting. Just kind of once you learn it, though, it's like, okay, that makes sense. Just something to be aware of. So what we can do is we can go in and we can change our permissions. So who can look at what, who in what group can look at what, and then kind of go from there. So there's not a command on here, but there's chmod, which is what the command that does that. So we mentioned groups, so I could say my group can look at this. Well, we have groups. Linux has users and groups, so I could say, well, Nick and I are in the eBoard group, and the rest of you are on the participants group, or something similar. And you can go through, and you can add users to multiple groups. It can be one group, and you can do permissions based on those groups. So every user has their UID, and that's unique to them, and every group has its group ID. And then from there, we can, you'll assign your group ID and your user ID to check, is this really Nick that's trying to log into this? Is this really Nick that's trying to read this file? And things so on and so forth. The root user, this is the most fun user to play with. Root can do basically whatever he wants on the system. If you have root, you completely own the system. It has a user ID of 0, and it is just completely, it can change any permissions on any file, even if it says that it can't. You can go ahead and do that. You can bypass anything. You can create users. You can destroy users, create groups. Do we cover sudo? Yes, so here we go. Cover sudo. So I don't want to give everyone root to my computer, but I want to let them manage the computer. Makes sense. But we don't want to give everyone, remember I said sharing passwords, so we wouldn't want to share the root password with everyone. We wouldn't want everyone just to have full access to the computer. So we use this command called sudo, superuser do. And what you can do with sudo is you can say, well, I'm going to grant certain users certain permissions, root permissions, for certain actions. So you could grant me the ability to change permissions on files, or I could grant Nick the ability to reset passwords without having full access to the system and without ever having to share passwords. So superuser is a very common thing. This is going to be modified in etcsudoers. There's a file you can go in to modify who is that. It could be root to do that, obviously. But once you're root, you can set up who can look at what, and that's going to come in repeatedly when you're doing pen testing, red teaming, blue teaming. Super users are kind of very important if you actually want to do things on the system. So you're going to constantly be hearing sudo or check sudoers to see if there's people in there. There's some other user permission commands: user add, create a system, or create a user in the system; group add, create a group; chown, change owner. So you can say, I don't own this file anymore, someone else owns it. Chmod, change the file permissions. You can go in and assign those little flags to the file, say you can read it. ID, who you currently are. This will show you your ID for your group, or for your user ID and your group ID. And who am I just says, who are you? Pretty simple. Who am I, root? Who am I, Micah? Goes like that. Any questions? We'll kind of going fast here. I don't know if anyone's kind of lost or any questions now. Okay. So this is kind of for running processes. When you're in the shell, there's a lot. As I said, go back and reference this. You can kill processes if your command's hanging. Like, oh, this is fine. Command's taking forever. Control-C. If you want to wait, you want to just temporarily pause the process and then come back and resume it. Control-Z. Autocomplete. If you're half typed the file name and you hit tab, it'll finish out typing the file name as long as that's unique, or show you the ones that you can do. History shows you the previous commands you've done. This is kind of useful, hint, hint on the demo. History will show you previous commands. These, what? Okay, maybe not. These are the most important ones. If you remember anything from this talk, remember these. So, bang bang will rerun the last command you've executed. So, I type the command, something changed, and then we rerun it. Bang bang does that. If you do a bang and then the beginning, it'll search from the beginning. So if I did echo hello, which prints hello, and then I did 5 more commands, but I want to go back to that echo, I would just type in bang echo, and it would go up the history to the last command that started with echo and run that, which is incredibly useful. And then this replaces things. So with my last command, I said echo hello, but this time I wanted to echo hi. I would just replace this with hello and then that with hi, and it would rerun that command, swapping the two. Obviously, for a command like echo, you would just retype it, but when you have like one line for loops right now in the whole thing, it's very, very useful to go through and do that. So those are like a basic, let's move around, let's look at things, why can't I do these things, permissions kind of thing. Let's go into some slightly more complicated commands, and we'll kind of see what we can actually do once we start getting deeper into the shell. So, find finds files. It'll look through your entire file directory that you have access to and find things. This is really useful because you're just like, oh, I don't know where I saved this file to, or maybe where's this flag on the system. Find will help you with that. Grep, regex. Who's here familiar with regex? Is anyone not familiar with regex? I guess is a better question.
I think a lot of people.
A lot of people? Okay, so what regular expressions are is it becomes a way to search for things. And I don't know if there's any examples of this in this slide set, but it allows you to say, I'm looking for a word that starts with P, has another character, and then ends with NT. So, and then it would search for print would show up, or you would do a star. So like P, and you could do a star here, because I don't know what's in the middle, and then an NT, or you could do like all kinds of different combinations. You could be like, I'm looking for a word that has the letter 3 or 4 in it, and they get really complicated. I think you'll kind of see in some examples of that as we go through things. But grep allows you to go through the contents of something that's in your terminal and search for these strings. So if I cat out a file and it spits out all the file context, I can then send it to grep, which will search for something within that. Because if I have a 1,000-line text file, I'm not going to be able to scroll through that by hand. And grep goes in. Which will show you where commands are located. So which cat will show you the exact location of cat if you need to modify that for some reason. So back into find, this is more of a reference sheet, like I said, for find. But as you can see, we have different flags, and then we can, here's the example. This is like the biggest thing. If you see the flag notation, so we're doing our command, the directory we're working in, and then we're specifying different types. So we want the type of a file with the name text.txt. There's an example of a find command. And then just all the different flags. Again, we can search by permissions. You can search for files that I'm allowed to see, that no one else is allowed to see, and kind of get more advanced through that. So use this as a reference sheet when you're going through the demo, because this will really help you out. grep. Okay, here we go. We have just mentioned regular expressions. There's no examples of regular expressions, but here's a link, and when you get the slide set, you can look them up, and they're really cool. They're very powerful, but grep allows you to do this. So you can search through things, and you'll find this to be a very useful tool. One of the reasons grep is so useful is because of the pipe. So the pipe character is like shift backslash on your thing, if you're not familiar. It creates this vertical bar, and what it allows you to do is take the contents of one command. So for example, the etc password command, or cat etc password. So it's going to print etc password, but then we pipe it into grep. So now grep receives all that data that came from the output of this, and it uses that to start looking through. So we can chain commands together. So here you can see we've chained like 5 commands together by taking the output, narrowing it down with a certain command, taking that output, narrowing it, sorting it, cutting it, and then showing the top results of it. So you can like keep getting more and more complex commands by just sending commands into other commands as you keep going through the process. Pipes are very useful, and you're going to be able to tell, like, this is the classic example, but you're going to be able to build crazy combinations and one-liners to handle all different scenarios that you run into when you're going through this. Redirection, similar to piping, but what it does is instead of sending it to another command, it sends it to a file. So this will take the output of the process command and send it to a file instead of sending it to another command. And you can do interesting things like this. There's standard input, standard output. You'll kind of run into these as you go, but for now, these are kind of the basics. Use 1 redirect, it'll overwrite the file. Use 2, it'll append the file, add on, things like that. And then you can read in from a file. So for example, this reads the content and sends it into the program, as opposed to the program doing the output and sending it into the file. So all kinds of different crazy redirection things. Environment variables, you can set environment variables. These are variables that are just global. So as you're in your shell, you would have different variables for different things. So for example, like I think shell is one. It'll say whether you're in bash or sh or zsh. So there's just different variables you can access from anywhere. This is a little bit out of the scope of Linux 101, but as we kind of go through Linux, you'll kind of learn about this. Aliases. These take long commands and make them shorter. So for example, if I had this super duper long complex command, I would alias it to recent. And then instead of having to type this every single time, I would just type recent. And that would kind of help me out. That's something to be aware of too when you're going through blue teaming things. Processes. Every time you start a new program, it's going to be a process. Every time you have 2 things running, you have 2 processes. You can see all your processes. You can kill your processes. This lists the processes that are going through. Top will like live, kind of like task manager style, show you the processes that are running on your system. You can go through and kill them. You type in the process ID, type kill. It'll go ahead and kill that process. And then jobs will show you, when remember we talked about backgrounding processes with Control Z instead of killing them. You can do job to show what processes you have running in the background. There's a lot more to do in Linux. Linux is such a complex thing. We're primarily going to focus this week on some of the easier things. There's a hard challenge for those of you that are a little more familiar to try and dig around and find that flag. But there's so much to do in Linux, and it's just an endless black hole of research. So feel free to ask all of us about it. Like, not all of us are Linux. Ask the Linux guys about it. We like to talk, and we like to do really cool projects on Linux. So there's a whole world if you're interested in this. If not, we're going to get to Windows next week. So here's some other cheat sheet, command sheet. If you don't know Linux and you're like, I'm so lost, do the demo and you still feel kind of lost, There's they're called war games. They're kind of like little interactive games you can go through. Bandit is a pretty good one for learning Linux. It's kind of an intro. It'll go through some of these different commands, get you familiar with it. So check out Bandit if you're willing to learn more. There's a YouTube series on it. This guy goes through some really good talks on like what is Linux, how do I install Linux. There's like 5-minute videos, and it kind of covers the whole thing. Okay, so the weekly demo, and this is kind of where the fun begins. We're going to go ahead and get started on this. We'd like you to feel free to ask questions. Please ask questions. We are here. We're going to be walking around the room. If you have any problems, I don't know what this command does. I know nothing. I remember when I was a freshman, I knew absolutely nothing about any of this, and I had to raise my hand for like the dumbest little things that I felt. But everyone's willing to work with me, and we're here to work with you. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. So, I am told that the RITSEC Linux demo is on every computer. Can someone verify this for me?
It is.
It is.
I helped install them all. It should all be there.
Awesome. So,
If it's not, let us know.
if it's not, let us know. If you want to use your personal laptop, you can get VMware Workstation for free from RIT. You can get a free license, and we have the VM for you to download. If you're like, what the heck is that? I would recommend doing it on one of these lab computers first, and then later go in and install Workstation, and you'll be able to create your own VMs, and that's just really fun to do. So